Who cares what everybody else is doing? Who cares? Just care about what you're doing. Just don't be, especially in this day and age where people are only putting their happiest times on social media, and we're spending all of our time on social media. It makes people constantly question, their own situation. And how come I don't have that car? How come I don't live in that house? And the happy heart is just a reminder to all the parents on Instagram who are thinking like that, because they're the ones reading this, not the kids. And the kids don't have Instagram, to not care about other people, just yourself, right? See the value within.
You're listening to Matt Keown, a graphic designer, animator, and children's book author from Northern New Jersey, discussing his latest project, The Happy Heart. He's our guest today on the podcast. Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Randy. I appreciate it.
And how's the weather tonight up in North Jersey?
Supposedly, we're having a weather event. We were warned earlier that there was going to be some snow. I don't know if this is actually going to be snow. I don't know if they're going to plow. I'm sure they brined the roads 4 days ago for it. And I'm just, we're hunkered down. We shipped the kids out to the grandparents so that we wouldn't have to deal with them during the snow event.
Yeah, they're calling for snow here in Philadelphia as well. And hopefully the grandparents aren't too far away.
No, not too bad. 20 minutes south of us.
So, Matt, before we get started, I just want to say thanks for being on the show tonight. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. It's great to get a little, just to get a chance to talk about myself. I live in a house with three women, so I don't get to say a lot.
So how did you come up with the idea for The Happy Heart?
It was an Etch-a-Sketch drawing on my oldest daughter's iPad, not iPad. What do you call those things? No, I said Etch-a-Sketch, but it's not an Etch-a-Sketch. It's the other one, Magnadoodle. So she used to scribble on it, and I would draw for her. And she told me to draw a happy heart. This was like when she was 2 years old. So who knew what a happy heart was? So I just scribbled this little crudely drawn heart on her Magnadoodle. I wanted to write a book. I figured I'd write something educational, and I wanted to use that little character that she was familiar with. So that was basically how it got started.
And this little character on the Magnadoodle, is that the actual illustration that you used for the book?
It's not, though I would draw it so many times over and over again. It's pretty much what it looked like, whether I drew it on the Magnadoodle or whether I drew it on the chalkboard in the house, so it was always, happy was always the same. I had to pick a different brush in Photoshop to give it that crude, iron fibers activated by a magnet on the surface of a Magnadoodle kind of look.
So The Happy Heart has an animated YouTube video as a companion.
Yes, thank you. It's on YouTube. Yeah, I wanted to, I guess this is where I should be plugging. I wanted to immediately, so Happy was just the start. The book itself was just the start. I animated the book after I wrote it because my daughter loves watching the iPad. She watches these bizarre, the Zool babies and the Finger Family. And, are you familiar with Baby Shark and the Finger Family, Randy?
I have not heard of those. Nope.
Well, they're most parents, I imagine some people listening to this will have kids, and they'll probably understand. So I started making YouTube content for the Happy brand so that I would, try to monetize Happy in more ways than just the royalties from Create Space and Amazon gives. And I started screwing around with plushies. I still have my father-in-law's great aunt's sewing machine underneath my desk which I'm going to use when I start mass producing happy stuffed animals, in my spare time.
Sounds like you got a lot planned for the Happy Heart.
I tend to be what's called, one of my daughter's friends' moms refers to it as hummingbirding, or a hummingbird, where you kind of get really excited and passionate about one thing at one time, and then just buzz right along over to the next project. You dump a bunch of hours in and a bunch of your life, and it's so important at that moment and so important at that time. And then you're like, oh, maybe I could be a yoga teacher. And then I dump it. You know what I mean? Are you familiar with that personality type, Randy?
Yes. In fact, I would include myself in that personality.
like you're starting a podcast right now. This is probably one of your hummingbird moments, though I do hope you pursue this at least until my episode airs. That would be ideal. So, but I actually started making a happy finger song. I write all the music. I do all the voices. And I started making like a Happy Finger family video for it, and then I just moved on to the next project before I finished that. But I do hope soon to get back on those and put some more out there, because you can't really get, you got to have a video that links to a video that links to a video to get these kids to fall into that rabbit hole, which would then result in money from YouTube. Somehow I hear it happens to people. I'm just going to keep putting stuff out there until they start sending me checks. I'm sure that's how it works. But and the project that I left Happy for was, you probably would understand this because you're from, or are we allowed to disclose where you're from on the air?
Yeah, feel free. It's not a bunker that's
okay. Okay.
Place.
Since you're from Philadelphia,
yep.
You might know of pork roll and Taylor ham and that debate. That is like the story of how Taylor ham came to be and how it became pork roll as well, because it is technically pork roll, though we shouldn't get into this. I don't want to upset some of your audience that might be listening if they happen to be on one side or other of the pork roll Taylor ham debate. So, but either way, that was the next animated project that I was going to work on, and then I hummingbirded off of that onto something else. So I don't even know what I'm doing right now other than recording this podcast. No, I know what I'm doing. I'm working on another kid's the YouTube series, but I don't know when I say that I'm working on it, Randy. I'm not really working on it. I'm just thinking about it a lot during the day when I should be focusing on other things. I'm not actually designing or drawing or creating anything. So I shouldn't say that.
Well, I'd say that thinking about it's the first step.
Yes. Yeah, this is true. Yeah. No, it'll be something. I'm just trying to get some paying gigs coming in first. I run a creative services studio, animation, graphic design, illustration, voiceover, things like that.
So getting back to the Happy Heart, the YouTube video has a really catchy theme song. After I watched it, I found myself having that jingle play back in my head. Did you sing that?
Yeah, I did. I wrote that on my daughter Riley's little mini guitar, and she used to love it. I wanted like a real out of the gate, immediately catchy, just over in a blink of an eye, also sort of thing. And she just got so excited she'd start stomping her feet, and I said, all right, I'll use that for the theme song then. Yeah, I sang it. I sang it. I wish I had the ability to auto-tune these things and tighten them up, because I don't sing a lot. I used to sing a lot. I don't sing a lot anymore, other than just in my car.
So without further ado, let's listen to the Happy Heart theme song.
The happy heart, the happy heart, happy wants to play. Happy's going through the body and making lots of friends. Happy wants to play.
So we've been talking about your kids. They love your stuff.
Have we? I thought, okay, no, go on. Sorry.
At least your daughter.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I mentioned one of them.
So when you were growing up, were you always into creating stories or did it develop later on?
No, I always was interested in that. Second grade is when I knew that I was going to do something like this, in the arts, the illustration, cartoon, whatever. I mean, it evolved into a traditional animation degree at a time that the industry was computer and waiting tables for several years afterwards. The writing of the stories, I have comic books. I always used to put my friends into comics and write comic strips. And every year it would be a different cast, obviously, whoever was in the class at the time. And then we would just, it was like budding satire at a very young age. I'd play on the kids' personalities, and they'd love watching each other laugh, looking at each other and laughing at each other. I say kids, they were my friends, but I was also a kid at the time, not a large adult in a child's class. But I did that, and then I also wrote my own, just whatever, hummingbirding, man. I have so many different comics, partially like started comics, started scripts for screenplays, and just a lot of really good first acts, and then I just get onto the next thing, and there's always so many hours wasted in the beginning and it's always so important to me at the time, and then I look back on it a day later when I forgot that I was even doing it in the first place, and I just think I'll never get that time back. But yeah, I always did something, man. Whatever comic, if I was reading Garfield at the time, I would come up with a dog that had stripes, just like, Garfield, as any third or fourth grader would, who has no experience with character development. He just uses whatever he sees as reference and calls it his own when he changes the eye shape. And I would do that, and all sorts of different things. I still do it. I mean, I'm still just doing different versions of it. The only difference now is I'm much more talented, much more skilled, and kind of an idea of how to turn it into an income. I wasn't thinking about monetizing the scribbles of my friends as a child, although I wish I did.
So you were talking about as a kid growing up, did you have any particular animated films or books or movies that you really gravitated towards back then?
Looney Tunes, Dragon Ball Z, Calvin and Hobbes, Far Side. Those would probably be some of my biggest, influences of my humor. Drawing style. I always, obviously, Happy doesn't illustrate quite how I normally illustrate. It's intentionally designed to look like the scribbles of a child or appeal to the sensibilities of a child. But I would definitely say that who wrote Dragon Ball Z? Akira Toriyama, Chuck Jones, and Walt were probably my three biggest stylistic influences, I would say. Humor-wise, I love absurdism, and Gary Larson was just he was so good, out of his mind. And then I loved Bill Watterson's illustration style. Obviously, they were beautiful. He was so talented. But the way that he would poke fun at adults through the eyes of Calvin, how Calvin would embody some of the worst things we hear ourselves, like thinking in our heads and say, but he'd be shouting them out loud. I can't wait till my kids are older and they can start going through them. Now they humor me. I tried to read Calvin and Hobbes to my kids, and I have to bribe them. I say, okay, we could read your book, but you have to let me read 4 Calvin and Hobbes strips to you. And sometimes they let me. Other times they say, no, not interested. Now a lot of those comic strips are still around, but they have they've turned into just small brands, basically. And they have teams of, I think Jim Davis has like teams of people just pumping out Garfield content. I don't know if he's still doing the strip himself. I've never looked into it, but I've seen, YouTube videos of like his studio and the things that go on there. He's got like teams of people working there. And I don't know. It's hard to do. I tried to do a comic strip once. I did a web comic. It's hard to come up with an idea. It's hard to come up with an idea every week, which was what I was doing, let alone every single day. It's no one when people say, "Oh, I never laugh at comic strips in the newspaper." Randy, don't you hear people say that all the time? "Oh, I never laugh at comics in the newspaper." Every day I hear people say that. Don't you?
I've heard even worse, to tell you the truth.
But it's hard to do, Every day you have to think of something. You can't be genius. It's impossible for genius to come around that frequently,
I hear you.
Everybody would be geniuses.
It's a creator's job is underappreciated. That's for sure. So yeah, I can relate to the Garfield. That was one of my favorite characters as a kid too.
Yeah, and I loved. Did you watch Garfield and Friends growing up?
Oh yeah.
Didn't you love what do they call it? Green Acres or U.S. Acres? With the pig and the egg with the legs, and then his brother, who was the chick that actually hatched. And, do you remember that show?
You are definitely digging back. I know the characters like Odie and all that, but I forget the name of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was a long time ago, but underappreciated, I think. Or maybe a bunch of people do appreciate it, and I'm just not aware of it. But from where I sit right now, it's underappreciated.
Yeah, I mean, there could be Facebook groups, like hundreds of thousands of people all gathered around Garfield. So.
And I'm just sitting here in my basement, just complaining, without any knowledge of what's really going on.
So, getting back to the Happy Heart.
Available on Amazon.com.
Nice.
Am I allowed to do that?
You're allowed to plug it.
Okay.
So
the Happy Heart is available on Amazon.com. 2-day shipping if you're a Prime member.
Nice.
I don't know if that still applies to New York. I don't know if there's in the Fallout they now have 3-day Prime shipping, but 2-day for most people.
As long as they can get their Happy Heart in 2 to 3 days, I think most people will be satisfied. So we've been talking about hummingbirding.
Yes.
And you're kind of talking about how projects bouncing around and so forth. Did you really feel like you wanted to get the Happy Heart out there and just buckle down and put that all together and just push it out?
No, it took years to write, or felt like it took years to write. I probably started it in 2016, and I don't think I published it until 2017. But there was a point at the end where in 2017 where I said, you know what, I just have to finish this. This is it's the finish line is ahead of me right there. Let me just finish the liver and then I'll be done. I think it was the liver because I didn't know how to draw a liver. How do you draw a liver? I had to figure.
I saw in the video how you had that little gap in the liver.
Yeah, I think, is it a gap? I think it's a membrane or something, right? I don't know.
You got me.
It's, I've seen, people have sent me videos of their kids reading the book and enjoying. My friends who supported me and picked up the book, they've showed videos, and the kids will point, and this is and the parents look at it, and then they're like, what? It's like the only one that's not easily identifiable right away. But yeah, I guess it gets the job done. Luckily, my audience is children, and they don't know any better. I mean, come on, kids are dumb until we shape them into something. They don't know any better.
So, Matt, what inspires you to continue creating and writing?
My wife says it's an attention deficit disorder. I would say it's just something. It's who I am. That sounds cliche. I can't help it. It's just, if these things pop in my head, it's not even a positive thing all the time, Randy. I mean, I'll have bad thoughts. I'm an anxious person, and I'll have bad thoughts, and these scenarios, I'll just create a bunch of like worry in my head as I play these scenes out that aren't happening. And then I have to remind myself that it's just my mind just wandering, and it does that a lot. But it also sees a lot of things, and thinks of a lot of funny things and positive things. And sometimes I'll get one of those ideas up there. I'll mull it around in my head for a little while, and if it's worth drawing or worth writing down, I'll write it down.
So, did you have any mentors that helped you along the creative journey?
Fernando Ruiz. He was my Saturday morning. He is a pencilist for Archie comics, and I used to take the Saturday morning sketch classes over at the Kubert School, the Joe Kubert School in Dover, New Jersey. And he was for like 7 years every Saturday morning, just kind of helping me. He was teaching me how to compose shots, like camera angles and drawing at good perspective when making your own comic. When I was in 7th grade. Just helping me with everything, just not just the anatomy, but how to tell a story, because that's I believe he still works for Archie. He's not a mentor in the sense where he showed me the way, held my hand, but he was constantly available to me to pick his brain, and he still is to this day. We still keep in contact. But he just, that's what I mean.
So we've talked a lot about kind of the ideas that led up to The Happy Heart. What is the premise of the book? What is it all about?
Well, it was, it's Happy. He's going through the body looking to play with somebody. And each time he meets a different organ, the organ says, I can't play right now. I'm doing my whatever the function of that organ is. And so it advances the story along. Happy's looking for somebody to play with. What's the next organ? Show the kid what the organ looks like, tell the kid what the organ does, and then move on to the next one. And then when I get to the end of the book and Happy's feeling sad because nobody wants to play with him, he meets the brain. The brain explains to him that without him, none of anything that anyone else is doing is possible, because his lub-dubs is what I called it in the book. His lub-dubs make everything possible. Without his lub-dubs, the brain can't think and tell everybody to do their jobs. And Happy is feeling left out because he can't do the things that they're all doing. And the brain shows him that you got to don't feel bad about what everybody else does. Just look at the value that you bring, see what makes you important. And that's all that matters.
Sounds like a good message. So you were talking about the brain in the video. Mm-hmm. As I'm watching it, all of a sudden the brain has this wild Irish accent or something like that. How did you come up with the idea to give the brain such a an interesting accent?
I don't know. Because like when I develop a character, I'm trying to channel somebody, and the priest from my church growing up, Father O'Connor, that's who I was like channeling, because he had a way of delivering his homilies where he was Irish, so he had the Irish accent, and he had just this tone and way of delivering these words that just had such an impact. Now, I didn't come anywhere close to that, but the tone and delivery and the brogue, that's kind of where that came from. I don't know why I decided the brain was going to be Irish. I don't know why the intestines sort of sound like Gilbert Gottfried. But that's where it came from.
What would you say is the ideal age who would enjoy the Happy Heart?
I would think like either newborn to toddler, right? Because once they get into school, they're going to be learning, bigger concepts than that when it comes to the human biology. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is the Happy Heart should be a prerequisite for public schools, K through 8th, because it gives them the basics of human biology. This way, the public school system can get into the nitty gritty of human biology. I'll save them the time. Do you have any Board of Ed members that listen to this podcast, Randy, that can mandate the Happy Heart be purchased? The Happy Heart available on Amazon.com be purchased for school districts?
There could be. And they're thinking to themselves, where can I get a book? It's a prerequisite for pre-med students at the toddler level.
Luckily, it's available on Amazon.com, 2-day shipping with Prime.
These like toddlers that are going to be read this book and they're going to go to first grade and they're going to start talking about the brain and they're going to tell their teacher, the brain has an Irish accent. I think you're going to start something, Matt.
Oh, this is good.
So you alluded to this with the premise, but I really want to hear, what would you like the parents and the kids to take away from your book?
Who cares what everybody else is doing? Who cares? Just care about what you're doing. Just don't be, especially in this day and age where people are only putting their happiest times on social media, and we're spending all of our time on social media. It makes people constantly question, their own situation. And how come I don't have that car? How come I don't live in that house? And the Happy Heart is just a reminder to all the parents on Instagram who are thinking like that, because they're the ones reading this. Not the kids, and the kids don't have Instagram, to not care about other people, just yourself, right? See the value within.
See the value within.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good message.
See the value within.
Matt, this is your grand chance here. Where can readers buy your books?
The Happy Heart is available on Amazon.com. And with Amazon Prime, it's free 2-day shipping. And please check out the YouTube channel. Search The Happy Heart Animated on YouTube to watch it. I mean, it's 5 minutes and 56 seconds.
Thanks, Matt. And
You're welcome.
By the way, we've also got your book linked up on the Creative Writing Magic website and our Twitter feed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me, Randy.
No problem. And before we close the show, is there anything else you'd like to say about the Happy Heart or any of your other projects?
I have an Etsy shop, and I sell a traditional Italian Christmas donkey that I sculpted and I hand paint each one. And they're really funny. They're not funny. They're really cute. They're fun pieces for your mantle. It's about 5-inch tall. It's a donkey with Paulie Walnuts' haircut and a velour Santa suit and a gold chain hanging down on a cross on its chest. It's the traditional Italian Christmas donkey on the 3MK Studios Etsy shop. Buy it for all of your Italian friends and their mothers.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. Matt, thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you, listener. You make this all possible. If you like this podcast, feel free to support us on Patreon and consider subscribing. The link to Patreon is in the description. And be sure to subscribe to the email newsletter on the Creative Writing Magic website to receive notifications when new episodes are available. And as always, thanks so much for listening. Stay inquisitive, support the arts, and keep creating. Bye for now.
Huh.